Food is on the move. The past 20 years have seen an explosion in the distance food travels to get to our supermarket shelves. Food miles is the term used by environmentalists and supermarkets to understand the journey our food makes. Looking at where food comes from is not as simple as reading the label in the supermarket. Each item in the supermarket carries with it a host of social, political, and environmental implications that don't appear on the label.
Supermarkets, they could do a lot more to help people understand the origin of the food. And it would put pressure on them to actually know where their food came from, because I think when they're importing the food a lot, they don't really know the source of the food, the workers' conditions, the environmental conditions on which their food is made.
The total distance this food traveled was over 240,000 kilometers. The estimated carbon dioxide emissions for this basket of food is over 82,000 grams. This is the reality of living in a global economy. We can get any fruit or vegetable any time of the year, but for this luxury of choice, there are some downsides which we don't often see. Tesco and Safeway declined to speak about food miles, but Marks & Spencer was willing to discuss their role in the global food system.
There was a sudden explosion in the mid-80s of fresh fruit from around the world, year in, year out. And M&S pioneered that. And that was done for economic reasons. Customers wanted it, there's a market need, we satisfied it, we grew our business on the back of it. Nobody really put any great thought into the environmental impact of transporting the fruit and veg in.
The infrastructure to transport this fresh produce from around the world is what concerns the campaign to protect rural England.
So this is all putting more and more pressure on the road network, on the airports and on ports, and consequently that is why we're seeing so many, because of all the development pressures, we're seeing so many applications coming forward for new roads, road widening, airport expansion with the aviation white paper due out in the autumn, and for port expansion as well, which people are getting really aggrieved about. It just sort of expands out and out, the social and environmental impacts of it.
Is the CO2 footprint worse than the pesticide savings that we've made by producing in Kenya? Are the British farmers' lost jobs worse than the Kenyan jobs that we've created?
Supermarkets get food from all over the developing world, and they have created thousands of jobs for growers, packers, and shippers. But are these countries really benefiting by sending us their green beans?
What you've got to look at is the underlying trend of who's gaining the profit, who's got the power within the food chain, and they're the people that are gaining the profit. And you might say that a worker is getting $1 a day instead of nothing a day by actually sending us their green beans. But what happens when the water supply runs out, when the pesticide use is too high for this perfect produce for the Western consumer? And also what happens when that Tesco's decides, oh, it'll be cheaper to go somewhere else, and that producer or that small worker, farmer, has actually invested in producing these luxurious beans for us. They've suddenly got no market, and they've got a depleted soil or depleted water supply.
In this globalised world, we all trade together, but we must give poor people, if we are to expect them to become a part of this without complaining, a fair share of the profit. Just to have them as the very basic producer and then take all the value of the whole value chain out, it defeats that argument. I mean, you're giving them, virtually nothing.
It's always very difficult, isn't it, to be able to translate Western middle class educated ideals on communities that don't necessarily have those advantages.
So what happens to the money we pay for produce? British farmers are increasingly frustrated by corporate control of the food chain.
Because the money's being paid in the supermarket tills, so the housewife's paying proper money for it, but it's not ending up back with the farmer in Kenya. Why not? Somebody somewhere, some multinational corporation, whether it's the supermarkets or whether it's some big shipper or somewhere, is going to make a hatful of money at it. That's exploitation of third world countries. I don't think that is. I don't think you can blame the supermarkets for that. I don't think you can. I mean, that's just global greed, isn't it?
The corporations who supply our food look at customer demand, price, and profit. The supermarkets fulfill customer demand at the expense of the environment and the developing world.
Increased global trade means increased use of environmental resources, even if it's at the level of just flying more jets carrying Kenyan produce to Britain. So the ideology, the basic ideology about how we're going to deal with poverty in the 21st century is anti-environment, is anti-protection of the environment. And in the end, the supermarkets are partially to blame, but it's down to the consumer. If you want luxury products and you want them to be healthy, you have to pay properly. If you want the people who are producing them not to starve, if you want them to send their children to school, not into the fields to grow the products, then you have to pay for these goods.
People want diversity. And I don't believe the way forward is based upon asking consumers to take a sackcloth approach, sacrifices. The approach forward is to take consumers on the journey with you, that sees the benefits. If Marks & Spencer, for example, stops selling strawberries in December because they have to come from overseas, all that would happen is that they would go and get strawberries from our competitors tomorrow. To do it suddenly, starkly, like a guillotine, we'd just put ourselves out of business.
With almost half the trucks on British roads hauling food, many are asking if the wide selection we enjoy in the supermarket is worth the environmental and social impact that comes with it.
This is a crazy situation. We're not actually eating more food. It's the same tonnage of food. It's travelling further to be packaged, stored in centralised storage distribution centres, and then sent out again to the hundreds of stores around the country. We've become more and more vulnerable to shocks within the world fuel system, the world food system. Countries that are supplying us the bulk of our chickens might suddenly, undergo a coup, and then we've got no chickens. These kind of situations, the recent Iraq war, huge problem potentially for our fuel supply. Where would we get our food from if we rely so much on fuel?
While the supermarkets are the ones transporting the food, and governments build roads and runways to help them do that, ultimately they do it so that we can enjoy strawberries in December. Just as the customer built the system bringing fruit from around the world, now the consumer has the power to demand a new way forward. Local food is still a tiny percentage of the market, and until customers seriously consider where their food is coming from, supermarkets will continue to fly, ship, and truck produce increasingly further distances.